How the IMF debt trapped Argentina, leading to skyrocketing inflation and poverty. So they did it again, folks. They turned around and did what they did in Kenya, like we were just talking about last week. They have been doing it to Argentina for a long, long time. As you can see with the graphic I got here at the top, Argentina is the main debtor of the IMF. So the country's $44 billion program with the International Monetary Fund is 10 times its credit allowance. So it's even over its own limit as far as how much debt it should be racking up, which, when a loan shark, when you go to a loan shark and he wants to make sure that you're still good for it, in the case of the IMF, they don't really even check if they're good for it. I guess they assume that there's enough wealth inherent in the country that they'll extract it some way, somehow. But even the loan shark knows when to cut somebody off and say, look, I don't want to have to break your legs and break your arms and then burn your house down. So it doesn't seem like IMF is a prudent investor when it comes to that, especially if it's $43.7 billion. And of course, this is followed by Egypt, Ukraine, Pakistan, Ecuador, Colombia, Angola, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. So this dwarfs Kenya's IMF debt. I mean, this is a huge amount of money. And we're going to get into it because it's going to link back to why we see, I don't know, Mike, if you're familiar with Javier Milei.
Let's go back to ask, how much of that big blue bar up at the top is due to Milei, the free market anti-government guy taking all these loans?
Yeah, see, the thing is, he was the sort of solution to the problem. Okay, so he basically became the regime change that they were looking for in order to institute these IMF austerity cuts, which a lot of people, believe it or not, world leaders they come into presidency and they have loans from the IMF that are outstanding. A lot of them say, you know what, you could shove them up your butt because we're not going to pay for them, and this is very true about Argentina. In the early days, you had the first Kirchner, not the husband. The husband was president, and then the wife was president after.
Oh, right.
I'm pretty sure. You have Christina was just president. Well, the guy, he actually said no to the IMF when he came in. He had all these debts, and he said, "Well, no, we're not going to do that," and stuff. And that really sealed the deal, where they hated these two forever. And this is why probably there was this assassination attempt on the wife, Christina Kirchner, just recently. So, but I don't want to speculate too much, folks. I'm sure there's two sides to every story here. I just report the facts. So let's see. Let me get a good site here. If you guys can see that, I'll check the chat and you guys can tell me what you think. So Argentina's long-standing relationship with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF as it's called, has been characterized mostly by a cycle of debt, economic crises, and the controversial policy prescriptions that many argue have trapped the country in a perpetual state of financial instability. This pattern of debt entrapment has its roots in the decades of IMF involvement and has had profound effects on its economy and society. So the debt trap cycle began in the earnest during the 1990s when Argentina implemented IMF-backed neoliberal reforms. These policies, while initially seeming to stabilize the economy, ultimately led to severe economic crisis in 2001. Now, following the crisis, Argentina defaulted on a $95 billion debt, marking a turning point in its relationship with its international creditors. So you can imagine that each country has a credit rating, just like we all do nowadays for some ungodly reason. And they can lend money from the World Bank and IMF and other institutions based on the rating of the country's credit. Now, if you go into debt like Zimbabwe or something or whatever, that can ruin your credit, make you a pariah of the world stage, and of course the West can go in there like a vampire and suck out all the resources with private companies. But for the most part, the IMF's role in Argentina's debt trap. Okay, Policy conditionality. So there's conditions. IMF loans often come with some very strict conditions that require borrowing countries to implement specific economic policies. Okay, like we saw in Kenya. This was the taxation that's very unpopular. These policies typically focused on austerity measures and market liberalization. That's a key word for privatization, which means giving the keys to stuff that used to be public for everybody and handing them off to private corporations who have done so well before. And as we saw in the instance of Margaret Thatcher's government when they privatized water, the amount that the bill went up was 300%, and the amount of toxic waste in the water went up even more. So privatization
still have shit in their water.
Not always
literal shit. It's like the scandal in Great Britain now. They literally have feces in their water, and it's like because water departments have to measure that, and it's down to like a particulate level, like parts per million, and they've greatly exceeded the acceptable level of feces in their water, just like literal fecal matter. It's disgusting, but you can Google it. There's so many articles about it, and it's because of privatization even still going on today. And as much as I hate when people blame Deng Xiaoping for like privatization in China now, because he's been dead for so long and out of power for decades, it's like that is still an effect of like Reagan and Thatcher of that same era in Britain and the U.S. So,
yeah. I was just listening to that today. That was the neoconservative movement of the 1980s that was fueled by Milton Friedman and people like Thomas Sowell, who said any government intervention into the economy is a mistake. You should let and this includes like regulations for food safety and just wildly stupid shit that you need in order to have a functional civilized society. Milton Friedman believed that the free market knew all. And, what's her name? Margaret Thatcher was famously, when asked what she believed in, was that she pulled out a copy of The Road to Serfdom was it The Road to Serfdom? I think that's Hayek. Anyway, it's Milton Friedman's book or whatever. I forget what. Let me know in the comments. And she said, this is what I believe in, libertarian economics. And this led to pretty much the decline of Western civilization, both with Reagan
cow disease.
Oh, don't get me started, Mike.
That's literally why they have it.
Yeah. So there was a cycle of dependency in Argentina, too, with the IMF. As Argentina's economy struggled under IMF-prescribed policies, it often found itself needing more loans, creating a cycle of dependency on IMF funding. So what they would do is they would have, you take out a loan that has a high interest rate, and you take out another loan that has a low interest rate to pay back the high interest rate, stuff that made no sense. Shooting yourself in the foot to stay cool. I don't know. To turn on the radio really loud to cover up a fart. Like, really makes no sense.
Yeah.
Cooperation with bondholders. The IMF's involvement often coincides with increased speculation by private bondholders. This dynamic can exacerbate financial pressures on Argentina, as higher interest rates on bonds make it more difficult for a country to manage its debts. So that's the other thing, too, is in the comments of the section about Kenya and their IMF debts, people really wanted me to focus in on Euro bonds. Now, I don't know what that is, so we'll have to look more into it, but the way I understand it is about 30 to 35% of Kenya's debt is, Africa. 35% of Africa's debt is the IMF and the World Bank. 20% is Chinese, and the rest is like Wall Street firms like BlackRock, Blackstone, and other institutions that hand out bonds and other financial derivatives of sort. So the lack of long-term solutions in Argentina, the critics argue that the IMF interventions have long focused on short-term stabilization rather than addressing underlying structural issues in Argentina's economy. A lot like a drug dealer. He's not actually interested in curing you of something. He just wants you to keep coming back to buy the medicine. That's capitalism, folks. Believe it or not.
That's a good point.
The debt trap the debt trap reached new heights in 2018 when Argentina received a record-breaking $57 billion loan from the IMF under President Mauricio. What's his name? Mauricio Macri, his administration. Yeah. So if you're already in debt and you're not doing, it's not looking so hot, why would you take on that much? And that's an unusual amount. That's above and beyond already what Kenya's full IMF debt is by far. I mean, what was it? That's a $50 billion. That's 5 times as much as Ukraine owes the IMF. So what are you doing, Argentina? What do you have? What tricks do you have up your sleeve? What resources do you have that we don't understand? Is it the lithium? What's going on there?
Is it like a Trumpian thing? Like they're hoping that, you know how they say if you owe the bank $1 billion or something, or no, if the bank owes you $1 billion, they have a problem? I can't remember how the phrase goes, but it's something like if you just borrow enough money, they can't allow it to collapse. They can't let you default because it ruins their whole business model. So I wonder if the same thing holds true on a country level, except that I don't know the West to be forgiving with debt. That's kind of a Chinese thing for forgiving debts, and I don't know what the plan is.
Yeah. I think it's weird because they could relieve the debt, but they don't want to, and it's about a cycle. I mean, they know it. Let's be honest here; they know what they're doing. But yeah, I don't understand the why somebody would continuously follow. But here's the thing: is I think you just touched on something really important. Is that everything is debt now. So when Donald Trump, look, for instance, when the city of New York in the 1970s stopped loaning money, stopped loaned money by the bank said the city is doesn't have the credit rating for us to give you loans anymore to run your courthouse and your public, the things that you need to run a city, right? Trashmen and police and stuff. So New York is deep in debt, and the bank has been loaning them money because we had transitioned into a debt economy where everybody just lives and works off of debt. You need a car, you go into debt to pay for it. You need a house, you go into debt to pay for it. There was a time when you could buy these things cash, sight unseen. You didn't need to take out mortgages. You didn't have to. It slowly became this way where we live in this debt economy. Anyway.
Well, it's the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. Sorry, I mean, just to harp on the one tenet of like vulgar capitalism, or anti-capitalism that I remember from reading Das Kapital. But it's like when people are trying to struggle to find profit in every sector that they can, that's when you see things like ballooning debt, products that are sold as a subscription instead of a one-time purchase anymore. That it extends all the way up into the national level, like you were just saying the IMF is trying to do.
Yeah, that's it. That's the package deal. Is that what Donald Trump did was he started getting money instead of the city of New York, and that's how Manhattan got converted into a rich guy's playground. During the 80s, the crime rate was horrible, and the bank said, we're not lending money to the city anymore because the city are a bunch of deadbeats. And Donald Trump said, look, I've got equity. I own all these properties. I exaggerate the wealth that I have, and I can get loans based on my collateral. And so he used that debt to just rebuild Manhattan into a playground for the rich. And that's how it's been ever since. And I think this was like, late 1980s, early 1980s, late 1970s. Yeah. So here's the fun part, Mike. You're going to love this. These are the debt trap stats I put together. The poverty rate in Argentina as of 2023 has reached 39.2. Now, this has changed all the way up into late, like 59%. I've seen 60% increase in poverty since then. 18.5. This is old stats. Government debt at the end of December 2023, Argentina's federal government stood at $368 billion. Foreign debt, $264 billion is in foreign currency, mostly U.S. dollars. So Argentina's holding on to a lot of U.S. dollars. That makes sense why Milei was talking like he wanted to get in and change the peso for the dollar. Inflation rate, the inflation rate's around 211%. Currency devaluation, the peso lost about 54% of its value. Economic contraction, the economy was projected to contract by at least 2.8% in 2024. Unemployment rate is at 6.2. External debt repayments is about $16 billion in external debt needs to be paid by 2024, end of this year. And the central bank interest burden, the Central Bank of Argentina saw its interest burden double, almost 9%, and pushing the public deficit up to 14%. Now, I'm not a big city economist, but it doesn't sound very good, does it?
Inflation rate of 211% sounds pretty bad. And it's funny because if they're going by the same math that we use here in the U.S., everybody's posting all these viral videos of showing their Walmart orders from a couple years ago and how it's gone up by double or triple in some cases, and with a claimed inflation rate of like 25% since that time. So I wonder if they're doing the same math there, where you have an inflation rate, but it's actually triple or double that.
Yeah. Well, we don't know because it always pays to fudge the numbers, right? It's always a good thing to keep people in the dark if it's really bad. You say, oh, yeah, the house is on fire, but not the whole thing.
You're all right. And you'll continue to be all right until you're not.
Yeah. Just go to sleep. Argentina now owes the IMF more money than any other country, with its debt equivalent to 5% of its own GDP. So it's got its pockets are really getting flipped inside out. So a big reason why Argentina is not in good shape is this deindustrialization. Now, it has a dependency on imports from other countries because it doesn't make enough of its own stuff. So the consequences of this deindustrialization are evident in Argentina's trade imbalances. Between 1990 and 1998, while exports grew at a modest 8% per year, imports surged at an alarming 25% annually. This disparity has contributed to the accumulation of external debt. The country struggles to finance its import needs. The currency issues have further exacerbated this situation, while the devaluation of the Argentine peso has made imports more expensive, widening trade imbalances and increasing the debt burden. As of 2023, Argentina faced an accumulated trade debt of $21 billion for importers, highlighting the difficulties in financing necessary imports. So they can't find, to save their life, a way to make their own stuff. And these IMF debts and this sort of colonialist, capitalist, imperialist kind of game, they think that they can get other countries to make their stuff for them and then somehow just say, put it on my tab, and that's going to make it okay, because that's essentially what they're doing. Put it on my tab. Argentina's export sector remains heavily concentrated in agricultural commodities, raw materials, making it vulnerable to price fluctuations in global markets. So the price of this can go down, the price of that can go down, especially the agricultural stuff, corn, apples, whatever they make down there. They can grow decent food in Argentina. And they have a pretty good wide climate zone as far as I know. This limited export diversification, coupled with lack of competitiveness in the industrial sector, has hindered the country's ability to generate sufficient export revenue to balance its trade. You know, and it's hard right now because isn't global demand down for like a lot of things? Because I personally, I feel like I'm a minimalist, man. I feel like I don't need a lot of stuff anymore. Yeah. Well, finally, the grocery store finally came out and said, okay, we're gonna lower our prices now, and people are like, "Why didn't you just do that before?"
Because it wasn't 6 months before the election.
Yeah,
it's so funny how many times it's been posted in very obviously pro-Biden news outlets, or even alongside of pro-Biden news. Like a lot of times they're attributing it to Biden himself, that he's like written strongly worded letters or something to the CEOs of Walmart and Target, gotten them to lower their grocery prices. It's like, maybe that's the case, but it's like, goddamn, if that's all it took, and it took you till now to do it, fuck you, dude. Like, goddamn. Sorry. Yeah. I know we're trying to keep it friendly today.
No, you're fucking right. I mean, as soon as they came out and said, we're lowering our prices, you knew right there was just an admission of price gouging. Like, oh, you were charging whatever you thought the market could bear. And this was during the pandemic when I think Albertsons or Kroger was thinking about merging with Safeway or something like this. And it's like, there's supposed to be rules in place to stop that from happening, because then they could charge whatever they want, and they're going to Martin Scarelli us out of, pineapple and beans, the stuff we need to survive. But in all seriousness, folks, don't eat tropical fruit if you're from a northern place. If you're in Europe, don't eat pineapples. Don't be an asshole. Sorry for the language.
Whether we like it or not, whether it's a matter of personal choice, I think we're all going to see things go away sooner than we expect. Like, we may see coffee go away sooner than we think. There's tropical fruits. I know the banana thing was a big deal on Twitter a couple of months ago. People were debating like the ethics of actually eating bananas. It's like, once they become too expensive, once that enslaved labor stops being available to you, you will not be able to choose whether or not you're going to eat bananas because it's ethical. You just won't be able to afford them.
Yeah, and here's a hip tip for all you guys. I talked to one of the top banana guys in the world. He says that there's fungi outbreaks going on in China that are fungicide resistant, that are spreading over to the normal places where bananas come from in the Central America and stuff. And it's spreading like hotcakes, and that there is a chance because of this. We monoculture everything, where we say we find this one type of banana that holds up in shipping, and that the consumers seem to like it more than the other bananas, even though the little tiny bananas are way better. That these bananas are the only thing. And then you have huge outbreaks of pests because there's no diversity, and these pests go, I love these yellow bananas, and look, they're everywhere. Let's just spread everywhere, and that's what happens. The same with the potato blight. I think the potato, especially the American potato, the Idaho spud, it's just the most boring potato that we could. Potatoes come from Peru. They're purple. They're gold. They come in all kinds of. It's a shame. It's a shame.
They taste better. Man, I actually could talk about produce as much as I'm not like a vegan guy, and I do love to eat meat. I actually just love produce a lot. But yeah, you're dead on about bananas. Like, there is only one cultivar left of bananas, and it's the Cavendish. There's the mini ones. I don't know if they're actually a different cultivar, or if they're just a different like variety of that same one. But yeah, like, you're right, because there's no diversity. If there was ever to be some kind of bacteria disease that affected all the Cavendish bananas and it spread, like you're saying, which it seems like we may be on the cusp of, we could lose bananas forever just as a species. We just would not be able to have them. And it's because there used to be 3 or 4 different kinds, and now there's only one.
Yeah, we'd be up the creek without a paddle on that one. I'm not really sure, but we'll cover that on another time. So getting back to Argentina, we go off on tangents here, people. It's okay. We'll always come back to the story. So we're talking about Argentina, IMF, Javier Milei, and bananas. So he just came into power. So we're talking about all this debt. They've accrued all this debt. And lo and behold, they get a guy in there who's libertarian that just so happens to be the poster boy and a path to like Western corporate influence. So Argentina's newly elected president, Javier Milei, has quickly positioned himself as a champion of IMF-style economic reforms, embracing austerity measures and privatization policies that could potentially open up the door for increased Western corporate influence in the country. Now, Milei's economic programs closely align with the typical recommendations of the IMF, focusing on drastic spending cuts, extensive privatization, and deregulation. The president has proposed slashing government spending by 15% of GDP, a move praised by the IMF as bold and, quote, impressive in its latest staff report. This approach is consistent with the fund's traditional austerity prescriptions aimed at balancing budgets and reducing debt. So Javier Milei was the guy in class who always sided with the teacher and always ratted you out and said, they did it. He did it. Did I do good? He loves the IMF. Yeah. They didn't do it. They don't know. They're cheating. That's Javier Milei to the IMF. He's like, whatever you want to do, if you want me to crush skulls of poor people on the streets with sledgehammers, just tell me and I'll do it. Because I'm a crazy dude with a chainsaw who talks to my dogs, my dead dog in heaven.
I do wonder. Sorry, just real quick. I wonder if the IMF is considered a capitalist institution by the libertarians, or if it's considered a socialist one. Because I know that socialists consider it a capitalist institution because it's an arm of the West and imperialism. But I wonder what the libertarians think of it.
I wonder too, because I always on anarcho-capitalism, and I always mess with those guys, and they have interesting taste, because a lot of the times that I tell them something about, the opioid epidemic or something, and they go, yeah, that would never happen with us. We'd never let that happen. I'm like, okay, what? I don't think that you believe. I don't think that's true, but I'm glad that you're morally against this. What this is, They really believe that their thing will lead to better outcomes as far as
that's the first thing that would happen. Like if they ever got a real free market in any community, even not at scale, just of any size, if they had real no holds barred free markets, there would be so much prostitution and drug dealing. You would have a populace entirely addicted to just substances and circuses. Like there would be no work getting done because it's not profitable to do actual work. It's profitable to sell people addictive substances.
Yeah, that was my whole thing. Is I didn't understand, first of all, that, and also how you're going to pay for police, firemen, national defense, product regulation, safety. It's like there's a lot of holes in that whole ideology, and I always just walk around. If you're libertarian, you've got a screw loose. Okay, you're a couple bananas short of a full bunch. So Malay, he's this crazy nut bar who comes in and starts saying, he speaks to his dog, right? His dog died and he was really sad, and then he started communicating with his dog telekinetically, and then he got his dog cloned because he missed him so much. Anyway, we could talk. I love dogs, but I'm not insane, right? I love my dog. When my dog died, the dog was dead. It was a dead dog. There, it was nothing more. It wasn't. Yeah. It was an ex-dog. This dog is no more. Weird guy. Okay, and here's another thing I want to say about this guy. Libertarian. Okay, believes in the free market, and
works for the government.
He banned abortion. He believes in freedom for the people to do what they want. Okay, so get this. He bans abortion, but then proposes a law saying that you can sell your children on the open market. So you can't have an abortion, but the baby that you were going to abort, you could definitely sell it on the open market. And this has been something that these libertarians talk about. Like one of these libertarian
He is a real
thinkers,
libertarian.
Yeah, one of these, well, except for the abortion part, but yeah.
Yeah. No, that still holds, that tracks because they just hate women.
Yeah. Well, right libertarianism is what it is now. Libertarianism before used to be like hippies in the woods who didn't want to be taxed and didn't want to live. It used to be slightly cooler. I mean, these guys were still morons, but they weren't. What happens when
you left them alone for a couple decades? Look what they developed into. See, it's a bad strategy.
It's the hermits turn into preppers, and then they turn into racists because they haven't been into town in years. Yeah. So anyway, Millet. I mean, what do you know about Malay?
Nothing good. He just looks like a caricature of like the Wolverine guy. He's so many things about him, like having his sister present when it should be like a significant other that he obviously doesn't have. He just comes across very much as like an incel that way. So again, tracks for a libertarian, of course. The dog thing is weird. Again, as a dog lover myself, like I still regularly. My dog died a little more than a year and a half ago, and I still regularly get super sad about my dog if I think about him. But I wouldn't clone him. That's like really weird. That's like some strange shit to do. It's like on par with the libertarians who have blood boys and talk about having artificial wombs as a solution for abortion or whatever. It's like, or I think it's Rothbard. Like Murray Rothbard was the one who said that child labor and selling your children is perfectly fine and ethical because you shouldn't be required to care for them.
That's the guy. Yeah, you nailed it there. I think that's the dude's name. I heard it from somewhere. Yeah. If you're going to make all drugs legal and everything else is going to be legal, then let's do that. But then, again, government regulation is kind of sweet if you know how to do it, especially if you broke everything up. You say, okay, everybody, we're doing libertarianism now. Everything's over. No more rules, no more regulations. And then it's going to be great. It's going to be a utopia where there'll be plenty of competition and everything will be wonderful. Everything will sort itself out. Those corporations that existed before will just remain the most powerful and most dominant. And the monopolies will get worse. And prices will go through the roof. And people will die. And it'll be dystopian as fuck. Sorry. You guys are stupid.
And on a local level, I just finished watching The Wire. I know this is like such an old reference. Like the show is almost 20 years old at this point. Like the beginning of it definitely is. But it's a great show. And if you want to see what libertarianism looks like in practice, look up on YouTube a clip of Hamsterdam. And it's from an episode in the middle of the show where one of the police commissioners tried this experiment where he ignored drug enforcement laws in a small section of a town in Baltimore. And he was just like, let them rip. We'll just cordon them off in this area, and will allow us to have peace in the other areas where the civilians just want to get on with their lives. And it became a shit show really fast. It was like, for anyone familiar with the show, it was literally hell, because it is much more profitable to just sell people drugs and substances or whatever else will make them feel good while they live in squalor than it is to actually provide anything that measurably and materially addresses that squalor.
And boy, let me tell you, I know from experience how much fun it is to be high as fuck and live in squalor. It's the only way to go. People think that, they don't understand the home bum, the hobo, the vagrant, the homeless person. Like, they don't drink because they're homeless. I mean, they do. They drink because they're homeless. They're not homeless because they drink. And a lot of times it depends on the situation. It's a self-fulfilling cycle where once you start doing that, like, life sucks when you're poor. And that's why I started doing drugs and smoking and drinking and doing all that stuff. And it helps. But then you're entrenched and you're addicted. And then it's almost impossible for you to get back out of it. It sucks. I don't think people understand. I know people that think homeless people are all criminals and stuff. That homeless people are some of the nicest fucking gents I've ever met. A little crazy, a little smelly, but good people.
Yeah.
I said guys that would say, I'm not participating in society because I object to it on a moral stand, you know?
I mean, also, that's legitimately more consistent than someone like Millet. It's like, a big criticism that I have of libertarians is that they participate in politics. And these are people who consider themselves individualists and rational actors in a market. It's like, if you believe that government is the problem, why are you participating in it? It's like, I'm a communist. I believe that states are good. Wielding state power is actually a very effective tool. And I still wouldn't participate in a capitalist government because bourgeois democracy is a sham and you can't reform it. Like, it has to be overturned. It's the only way. If we lived in a communist country, I would absolutely be in the Communist Party trying to participate in politics at my local level. But we don't live in that country. I would love to get there someday. But yeah, I just think that Millet is displaying the obvious hypocrisy. It's like, for us as collectivists, and maybe not you so much, I know you're a little more anarchist, but it makes sense to wield state power in a way because you understand that collective power is the only thing that accomplishes anything, and the most effective way to wield collective power is with a state apparatus that kind of forces people, compels people in a way, whether it's like with a carrot or the stick, to accomplish projects, whether there's infrastructure projects or just to live alongside each other in peace without selling each other drugs and immiserating each other and creating a hell situation. It's like, you need government regulation at some level. But it is the ultimate hypocrisy for people who not only believe in free markets, like profess to believe in free markets and hate the government, but then also who believe in individualism, to participate in government at all. Like, they're hypocrites.
Yeah. Look, the government represents the people. Corporations represent the shareholder. That's all you need to know. And when your government gets corrupt and doesn't represent you anymore, you don't throw the whole thing in the garbage and say, well, let all the industrialists have everything and let's just do. No, you take back your government and you make sure that it works right. Period. And then anybody who says, I want a public library in my neighborhood, or like, I know that libraries aren't a big thing anymore, but if somebody wants a road to be fixed, or they want police to come and stop a rapist from raping their cornhole, then you have to have some taxation and you have to have some system in place to do that. I sort of distracted myself by saying cornhole. I'm a bit crass, folks. Sorry.
I think we really should regard libertarians or anyone who claims that they're going to get government out of your life in a significant way as unserious as anyone who said that like real communism had never been tried or real socialism had never been tried when they were trying to defend the concept after the collapse of the Soviet Union, like the 90s, when it wasn't popular to say that, because of course Chinese socialism hadn't built itself up to be the titan that it is today, with actual accomplishments for its people that you can tout and show as a benefit. So I mean, yeah, we should. There has never been a free market. Anyone who says that they're going to remove government influence from your life and that's going to make things better, it should be. You can reference all the times people like Millet or anybody who has gotten into office, even here in the U.S., and then they enact further restrictions on people's personal lives. They showed themselves to be bigots and just right-wing lunatics for whatever policies they claim to advocate for.